Welcome to the Unriveted Podcast, where we talk about artificial intelligence, digital transformation, and of course, people. Today, our podcast is brought to you in part by the book that John and I have put out, Artificial Intelligence in a Weekend, an executive's guide, available on all ebook channels you can imagine. Well, with that, Johnny, we have a guest, as we know, and a repeat guest. Let's go for an intro.
All right. Thank you, Martin. So today we are thankful to have our guest, Dr. Joan Palmiter-Bajorek, who is coming to us. We've actually met Dr. Joan in person before at a conference. So it's glad to reconnect. But Dr. Joan, thanks for joining us. And we would like to hear, as we typically do, we pass it over to you. So you can tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about how you got to where you are today, especially as it relates to the AI domain or the digital transformation domain. So thank you so much, Dr. Joan. I will turn it over to you and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Well, delighted to be here. Yes, I met these lovely folks in the salad bar line, if I remember correctly.
It sounds about right. Yeah.
Sounds about right. We're waiting. Always about the food. Well, greetings from Seattle, whoever is listening. I am an AI entrepreneur. I'm a builder. I have my master's in linguistics and my PhD in speech language technology. Been working at enterprises and digital transformation agencies and startups in the space. Working on the back ends of cool products that Fortune 500 companies. Today, I'm an AI consultant. So really measuring that ROI, getting companies to buy in, and honestly, really working in the blue collar trade space. There's some huge wide open space for different sectors other than contact centers and phone trees, which has paid my bills the last few years. And I have a book coming out soon. I'm an author as well, Martin and John. So huzzah, I'm really excited about that. First book coming out with Wiley. So yes, your AI roadmap.
Wow, your AI roadmap. And we'll show that in the credits. And that's awesome, Joan. Since we last spoke, a lot has transpired out in the world, in AI specifically, in digital transformation. A lot of epiphanies and changes in how people see AI. It's magic how many AI experts have come out of the woodworks. If you've noticed, you've seen a few. It's interesting to see that. I'll accept it, but ChatGPT usage as an application person is not an AI expert, as we know. But it's interesting to see that and be humored by it. Welcome aboard. Please talk us through some of the fun things that you're seeing today, and maybe some of the challenges that we're going to have coming up in the year 2025.
Oh yeah, well. I think what you mentioned with ChatGPT and anyone calling themselves an AI expert, whether they've built or not, is the democratization, like the ability to actually leverage these tools in a no-code way and plug it in as a back end and put a cool front end on and define the use cases is, I think, really cool and really magical that people around the world can be building stuff. As you mentioned, with pitfalls, of which there are so many, content moderation, spewing out things that are, racist and sexist is so fun. But really thinking about, in our use cases, the business ROI, I think people are not quite ready for, as OpenAI raises more and more and more money, are the projects we're working on fiscally sound? Is a question I have with stakeholders all the time as, data lakes expand and GPU usage to maintain those things. Anyway, it's a bad math problem, if I could make that joke, making sure that all those numbers add up in the short and long term.
Yeah, I will agree with that, because one of the things that I have seen, and I think you semi-mentioned this, Joan, when you responded to that question from Martin, is that a lot of businesses, their data is still very messy. It's still very hard to build a AI model on top of that, let alone like a machine learning, which obviously machine learning and AI are intimately related to one another. But I'm interested to hear, your experience or your at least beliefs when it comes to, you know, is it still up to businesses to make sure that their data is very AI ready or ML ready? Because if you don't have good, clean data, then everything that comes downstream is going to suffer. So what have you seen in your experience?
Totally. Data, data, data. That's the name of the game. Well, and it's funny you mentioned this, John, because I talk to a lot of customers about like the foundation of anything you want to build is that data piece. So if you have data that has huge gaps in it, if it only represents part of it, are you even collecting the data? I give an example of my agriculture customer. I'm allowed to speak about them. We don't document things. It's literally pen and paper today. But the unicorn of a company they dream of being and the value of that data and optimizing their yields of agriculture produce, is required to become the company they want to be and the opportunity space in agriculture. So, yes, John, I talk to so many companies. Where's the data? Do you hold the data? Is anyone cleaning or owning or leveraging the data for data-driven insights? I think, people in the AI world, of course, we're leveraging data every day and downloading it and playing with it. There are other stakeholders yet to understand the value of that. Keep repos organized. We could make so many jokes, but I think that data engineering and cleaning is wildly undervalued even today.
Interesting. This is just like winemaking, where you think about you have the grapes, you have the process, and you have the hygiene. And so, this is agriculture and AI. I think that's a good marriage. I find it interesting because I actually was with a solution SaaS company that focused on tracking, like when there's a recall from from an item in a store, and tracking it back to the lot, the field, and the track at the farm. Now, I know about the clipboard, the paper, but there's Excel spreadsheets now, and there's some Google Sheets even now, and that other company that also does online sheets, name any of them. Those exist, and it's funny that it's only as good as the data you have, and if you train on holes in data, you have to think about solution ways of working around that and in your solution set. So if you're trying to answer a question, all questions, and you don't really have the answer, what I find interesting is if you're relying on a prompt-based solution, you may get an output, and the output may have no relevance to what you asked. And I find that very humorous. And it's funnier when it comes from vendor A or vendor B or vendor C without outing them. Because John and I'll also do nefarious things with these to see what they'll do, and it's fun.
That's hilarious. Well, and I think, as you mentioned, kind of inputs and outputs, our world is changing. The data sets are dynamic, if you're calling them differently, or data streaming. And so to think that, and one of my favorite examples is a CPG company I worked for previously, and they were sampling on their Q4 data and extrapolating that out for revenue things. And I was like, a CPG only thinking about their Q4 data? Like, how does that balance out with your summer data? I'm very, very worried about, how you think about that. But they just selected 1 month and said this month is extrapolatable to everything we do, which is problematic. But thinking about that data acumen, that data knowledge. I love, Martin, that cleaning metaphor. I'm going to use that, the wine, many times again.
Wine consumption is a passion, and traveling the United States and internationally also, and learning from winemakers and their passion. It's not just about overconsumption. It's about their process. It's about how they put their body of life effort into it. And you see the delta often is just the hygiene, because they're starting with a source product. It's called a grape. It's in a field. Is the hygiene of the field good? Is the hygiene of the grape good? Is the hygiene of the process good? And anything that introduces contaminants spoils the whole thing. And even temperature at storage will spoil your wine.
Well, we all know the output is good or bad. So certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a topic that, I don't think gets enough traction when it comes to people talking about, machine learning, artificial intelligence. We build so much into what we think that these models are capable of, but we don't realize that it's based off of having good quality data, right? And Martin and I mean, we've been talking about this for years and saying it all starts with the data, right? So, not to go down on a tangent with this, but a lot of AI models have been, reprimanded in the past because they're saying, oh, well, they're biased, or they're racist, or they're, throwing out misogynistic responses to questions. And I'm not saying that they're not, but again, that's the fact, is that the data that they're being trained on is data that's created by human beings. So, kind of getting into a question here, Dr. Joan, is, what do you think about, how do we account for that type of issue with having the models that we rely on, the foundational models, that is? I mean, there's obviously a lot of models that are SMLs, small, or SLMs, small language models, not LLMs. But think about that, like, yeah. I didn't come up with the term, Martin. I didn't create it, but yeah. How do we account for that, in your opinion?
Oh gosh, those humans, so annoying. What are they doing? They make data and then they try to use the data. Well, I think, one of my examples that I talk about this with, John, as I put my words out of order. Oh, how to lie with statistics. So true. So true. Well, I usually, the example I give is about Twitter. How Twitter used to be exceptionally moderated and you only see certain types of content, even though people were typing the same garbage in, garbage out previously, but it was being moderated on the back end. When those moderators, and 90% of the company got laid off in a few weeks, right? I certainly saw explicit content, wildly racist content, right? All kinds of words, the spew of the internet. And unfortunately, that's in our data sets. As you mentioned, John, unfortunately, that is in the foundational models of many of the things we use. Facebook, X is putting out models, etc. So either we choose a different data set, these large language versus a subset of maybe moderated. Do we want to clean it? I mean, many companies use very expensive offshore teams to screen. Which we could talk about the implications of that. I think Nigeria did a union recently, but point being, it's something you have to actually tackle instead of just like, I hope my data set is clean. That rarely at scale is going to be effective.
You said one of my favorite words, hope. And hope is not a good strategy in tech. It is one that will guarantee failure if you hope you'll be successful. But success is something you pursue, and it's like being perfect. You're never perfect, but you can work towards perfection. And we're not a perfect world. And so the corpus of data that we train models on at the larger scale is going to be problematic. But on the smaller scale, if you contain your data and the data is your own data, privatized, concierge serviced, managed, your outputs from these language models are infinitely cleaner, less likely to have some of the issues that we talk about in the wild. And that's a trend actually that John and I both have been part of in the last, I would say, 18 months, building specialized solutions like this. I would call them purpose-built solutions. And in the world of OpenAI, it's building your own GPT, right? But it's your own GPT with your own data and maybe more of a RAG augmentation set. And it's fun to do these projects. It also shows you that there is a step and repeat of these. You can domain this for some subset of area, and then it's really good. And then you say, hey, can I apply this elsewhere? You can, but you need to rip out the engine and replace the data and then kind of do a rebuild. And that's well known. And there's several companies out there that are trying to sell that as a solution. And I find that interesting. Do you see much of an end to this game? Do you see, because there's always this new acronym, this new thing coming out, but in the core, we know there's some simplistic things if you step back with some complex things building it. And I'm kind of concerned in the learning process and teaching people and educating where value is. And I'd love to get your viewpoint and the people that have been standing back this whole time, and now they want to get into corporate level implementation of where artificial intelligence is. And it may be a good time now, and I'd love to hear how you're seeing the trends and what could be happening in 2025.
Oh, multi-pronged question, Martin. Yes. Okay. Well, I think certainly what you're talking about.
I usually have heard.
Yeah. Paragraph of questions.
I'm usually the guy who gives you like 3 questions, Dr. Joan, and then Martin sits there and makes a face like, no one's ever going to answer that. So anyway,
I'll try my best. I mean, I think one of the key things, Martin, that you're talking about is kind of enterprise data, and do companies know their own data? And that is a problem that will not go out of style anytime soon. Every customer I've worked with, there's siloed data, or do we understand our data? Do we've got a team on, or I mean, the internal thing is going on, and it's dynamic. That problem will not go away. I really see AI eating software. That's kind of what I see in the longer term. And I'll put out the prediction today that there are going to be a smaller number of players because of that profitability. I see all these awesome companies scaling things. I'm like, fiscally, I'm not confident it will have more than 3 to 5 players that are fiscally viable in the 5 to 10 year time frame. I'm talking about the Anthropics of the world and the Mistrals of the world.
Right.
I mean, you know how much capital goes into these games.
Right.
And as an investor, you may want many, horses to run to try to run for that unicorn. But just because of today's wild cost to make that happen on the hardware side, the people side, the data side, that's, I believe the idea of a book called Your AI Roadmap one day will kind of be a joke. It's like your tech. You know what I mean? Like that word will be ubiquitous to be meaningless.
No, I seem to be seeing the same thing, is that, as soon as a startup comes out, or an AI startup, we'll say, comes out with some offering, is that very quickly Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, whoever it is, happens to build that capability into their models or their systems right away. So you get all of these AI companies that are built off of LLM systems, like agentic or otherwise. And then all of a sudden you get one of the foundational model companies, like I just mentioned, that seem to just say, all right, well, we've made the same thing and it's, infinitely better than whatever is out there in the field. So working in the field myself, I often feel discouraged to try and use these LLMs as a basis for my own, business opportunities. When I say tomorrow Google could come out and say oh yeah, we're building a no-code agentic AI system. So what do you think is the differentiator between the big shots, the Googles and the Amazons, or the Anthropics? What do you think the differentiator is in the future moving forward for smaller companies that are trying to get into the AI space but can't compete on the infrastructure cost or anything like that?
Humans. I think would be
Nice. Oh,
ironically
yeah.
to business deals have at least 2 signatures on them, typically. One on the customer side and one on the other side. And leadership is something that OpenAI has really struggled with, of the ins and outs of people being ousted. And I just saw more news this morning that Murati, I believe her name is, continues to poach top AI talent from OpenAI. And so I think really, as you mentioned, John, someone has to be building it. Today, this is not an API that you just call. This is a sophisticated build out. And so I think those people, personal, I think we've all worked with that salesperson that continues just belittling you and telling you what you need to do. And you just want to run away. You're not interested in working with that person in the trenches for a decade. So I really believe that humanness is a key component of that future.
100%, Joan. I'm with you. As we start our wrap up here, Joan, I think it's really important to come up with a couple of key takeaways for our listeners. Just to let you know, we crossed the 10,000 subscriber barrier on YouTube. Woo, I know, kudos.
Congrats.
And for our listeners that don't get to see our lovely faces and see the visuals that we put out here, can you share some key takeaways for them?
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, Martin, briefly about kind of the pivoting, where some people would love to be on the executive level. I don't know about your DMs, but they are quite full. Or we're talking about some things, I really want to mention kind of the individualistic part. I think there's so much in the ecosystem about the B2B play and less about like, I'm going to get laid off, or I'm really terrified about how I'm going to keep putting food on my table. And that's really what my book is about. I wanted it to be 3 pieces of, one is like plain language on AI, career stuff, and money stuff, and widely like scrapped the first section. So the book is really, your AI roadmap. The first whole chunk is modern careers. 50% of Americans have layoff anxiety. I would argue it's a whole lot more than 50%. I've been in 2 AI layoffs. Woohoo! And so really think about how to be resilient in this AI ecosystem. How many humans do you actually need building? What is fiscally viable? So think about resilience and our finances at home. The whole second part of the book is how I've built wealth and recommend that people think about their personal finances. So I think as far as the like humanness, as we talk about human pieces and kind of the data that we own, we know ourselves, taking care of ourselves and our families. That's a lot of maybe really fun topics, but things that people in my DMs are like, I'm scared. Do I even go to college? What is this AI world going to do for me personally? So maybe Martin, not exactly what you're asking for, but that's a lot of my DMs are full of fear and anxiety. So really addressing.
This is great. And we can pick up on this topic at a future date, because I like to help people with that fear. And that's a topic that John and I, it's one of the reasons we put our own book out is to simplify. And we appreciate you're sharing our passion to simplification and making sense of this. So on behalf of our Unriveted crew, which is John and I, we really do appreciate you coming back for round 2. And we wish your AI roadmap the greatest success. And we hope it makes Oprah's list.
Whoa. Thank you. Well, first book.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's once it's on Oprah's list, then it's, that's all that's the key. We haven't, you know what, Martin? We haven't even tried to get our book on Oprah's list yet. So maybe we should, make an effort for that too. We could put both of our books on there, right?
Companion books.
Awesome. I'll ride your coattails anytime, Joan. All right. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be back.
Joan.
Thanks, Joan.
Thank you.